Voices of the West. Today we have the sheer joy of being joined by Jim Burnett, otherwise known as Casey Nash, author of all of the Casey Nash books. And boy, we are actually up to number 40 right now. So that's quite the accomplishment. Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
So book 40, that's like major milestone on things. What got you started in writing that led you on the trail to this?
Well, I wrote for some Christian magazines, leadership magazines, for about 20 years before I took the dive into novels back in 2014 and started writing my first one. And I got to probably about 85-90% finished before I even told my wife I had written it, because I thought maybe this is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. And she was such an encourager and a very good critic as well. But she read it and just cried. And of course, I tell people she may have cried because it was so bad, but she said it was because it was so good. So she's been my cheerleader and, my best critic. And so thus started my writing with Westerns, with the Miracle at Collar Spring Ranch first series.
Yeah, why do I remember that coming around ways back?
Yeah, that's been a minute. Yeah.
So here we are with all the way up on the Casey Nash books on things. What started that whole series up?
Well, I guess just like the other ones, an idea. It's always an idea with me. Sometimes just one simple one-liner gets me going. And so I created the character Jubal Stone, and man, he's just had legs, I mean, a lot of series. I mean, like I said, my first one, I think it was 6 or 7 books, and then you kind of felt like you finished. With Jubal Stone, it's like there's not a ending, it's not a finish line, and that's just so cool. Just all the adventures he's on,
Yeah, indeed. What inspires you for doing Jubal Stone? What gets the idea of a plot in your mind? Where does that start?
Well, I grew up around horses and cattle and all that, so the Western heritage is in my blood. And then I also travel out west a lot. I go usually every year to Wyoming, and I get a lot of my fodder for writing there. And I don't know, my mind is always spinning, with just thoughts, and going down the road, and I'll think of something and I'll try to make a note of it and come back to it. And but like I said, just a simple thought sometimes is the beginning. And then I just, I think I'm probably different than a lot of writers. I may be upside down. Been accused of that before, but anyway, I start with an idea, and then I pretty much find a title for it pretty quick, and I'm able to kind of give a summary of that book, and I go from there. And I never write with an outline. I never know what's coming. I just sit down and write.
But you have a rough idea of where you're going.
Yeah, somewhat, but I do not flesh the chapters out. I'm always thinking, and I may put something down and say that's going to come in a later chapter. But I don't know. It's a cool experience, when you sit down and just start writing, and it's there. It just appears.
Where did the name for Jubal Stone come from?
That's a good question. I think probably the Jubal part may have come from one of Glenn Ford's movies, Jubal. I always loved that name. And then I have a friend whose name's Stone. In fact, his name is Joe Stone, and that's in this series is Jubal's father, who was murdered years ago. He was a lawman as well. So my friend was just elated. He tells everybody, I'm in the book. That's me. He's talking about my family, that kind of thing. So Jubal Stone kind of, it was born, and it's just, was a catchy kind of name to me, and just reeks of Western,
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're putting together the Jubal Stone books on everything, what do you see for he himself? How has he developed differently than you ever imagined he would?
Well, the first book it starts with tragedy, and he loses his whole family in a vengeance killing. Like I said, his dad was a lawman, and some men came and killed him and his family. And Jubal was shot, but they thought they killed him, but he was dead. He's 14 years old, and so you see in these chapters, each book, he's maturing as a person and becoming more well-rounded. I mean, at first it was just vengeance. He just wanted to kill those that killed his parents, his family. But he has a real knack as a lawman, and it's kind of true to his blood because his father was well known across Texas as one of the best lawmen there ever was. So that was sort of in Jubal's blood, but it had to be kind of coaxed out. And he came across people that knew his dad, and the first one was a sheriff who actually was Jubal's dad's deputy. And so he took Jubal under his wing at 16, and that's the first time Jubal became a lawman as a deputy. And he just went up the ladder pretty quick. He just had that knack about him. So I think at the age of 18, he was asked to be a sheriff of a town of his own. And then a couple of years later, he was asked to be a United States Marshal. So he's developed as a lawman, but also as a person. And then he got married, and that takes him on a totally different odyssey, and it just makes him very human. He's got a wonderful wife and a child, and another one on the way. And so I don't know. It's like, you write about these characters are almost like your friends, like family or whatever. And I tell you, Kevin, for me, it's weird, and I'm sure many authors would say the same thing, but there's been many times I would be writing and I would just be weeping over what the situation, because it was so real. And and I throw this in as a pastor. I've been a pastor for 37 years, and it's interesting how those overlap. But a lot of experiences I've had with people, and my own experiences, are in these characters. From death, losing loved ones, to sickness, to crisis, whatever. And I think that's probably one of the reasons people like Jubal so much. He's a real person. Real life things are happening to him, and he doesn't always, at first come out on top, but he keeps working at it and deals with it. And like I said, I think a lot of my pastoral experience in the past, and even what I'm dealing with now, as a pastor, dealing with people, that it just really filters into my characters.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where do you see, or do you have a endpoint for Jubal someday, or is that something far off in the distance, or it hasn't evolved there yet?
Well, I would say it hasn't evolved there yet. I hope that he will have, I think of my good friend, Paul Thompson, with his Shorty Thompson series. I think he's like 130. So I'm chasing him right now, but I'm way behind him. But no, I don't see an end. But I think when I got to that point and felt like, okay, I pretty much exhausted Jubal Stone, then I'd want to stop there. But the cool thing about it is he's just got a lot of leg room to run, and I don't see it ending anytime soon. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. And I would also say, I have another series parallel with that one, but it's the Eutychus Bly lawman, and actually Jubal trained him, but he's a Kansas range detective hired by the governor, troubleshooter. So I've written 8 books on that. I'm working on the 9th right now. So I kind of pivot from those. I write more of the Jubals, but I pivot into the Eutychus Bly, and that's another kind of unique name. I love that name, Eutychus Bly.
Getting the story of how you came up with the Eutychus would certainly be interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was just another one of those kind of Jubal Stone deals. Is I was thinking about a fresh series, and that just kind of came to mind. Eutychus, that's a name in the Bible. That's actually the guy that fell asleep when Paul was preaching. The Apostle Paul was preaching. He fell out of the window, and people thought he was dead, and Paul went and prayed over him. So the Eutychus, and then the Bly, I don't know where it came from, but it just seemed to work. And, you know, he was a pacifist, raised that way. Parents, especially his dad, was, you know, did not believe in violence of any kind. Therefore, they lost their properties like 3 times, and even his baby brother was burned up in a house. But his father said, "We're not, you know, we're not gonna strike back or whatever." But then Eutychus, just as he got older, he lost 2 of his homesteads, and then he had enough, and something changed in him, and he tried to make things right with a person that burned him out, and he almost got killed. But then the governor contacts him and says, "I want you to be a range detective, and it's a new office, and but I want you to be trained." And that governor asks the governor of Texas, I think, to get in touch with Jubal to train Eutychus Bligh as a lawman. So that was interesting. So I've had several stories to overlap, bringing Eutychus back into the Jubal or Jubal into the Eutychus.
Definitely there. So
Yeah.
tell me, just out of the sheer curiosity point of all this, as an overall pastor for the last 37 years or such as we go on here, what brings you into wanting to write vengeance-based westerns?
Well, I didn't, you know, I don't think like in my mind I'm saying, okay, I want to write that, but I think they're kind of real to the times of what was going on then. That the law was young, you know, and a lot of the lawmen had to deal with things on their own, and so there's a lot of violence in it, and it's real. And I don't try to glamorize that. I don't really like it, but it's just a part of the series of the 1800s. And then I think my experience growing up around horses and cattle filters into that. Like I love the West. I've always had a love affair with the West, you know, and so it's just so natural, you know, these stories to me. You know, I'm like a lot of people say, you feel like sometimes you're born in the wrong century, but I'm thankful I was born in this century. But a lot of that stuff just intrigues me, you know, just reading the history. Those people were so tenacious. They were survivors, you know, and we don't know a lot about that in that sense, you know.
Yeah, we don't have to struggle quite to the level they did to survive just on a
Right.
daily basis.
Exactly. Right.
Convenient thing of having a car and air conditioning and grocery store. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
good things there. So what can people look forward to with the 40th book that is coming out here shortly with, and who is Gator Wade?
Well, that is an interesting story in itself. And I think it's, you know, I don't know, I would say I feel like it's one of my better ones, you know, and I wanted the number 40 to be special because it is kind of a milestone. And so I started kind of early, you know, cooking some ideas. And frankly, one of my reviews, and yes, authors do read the reviews, and I love the positives and I learn from the negatives, and I really do, because you know when you go to look at your reviews, I don't know about others, I'm drawn to the negative ones. Like, okay, I want to know what they said, and some of it is just out there. It's like I don't even know if they read the book, you know. But one person recently said, and apparently it was um, Afro-American, and he said, you know, I love your books, but why don't you have, you know, Black people in them, because they help build the West. And I got to thinking, and I'm like, well, you know what? He's right. And so thus Gator Wade was born. And he was born during the Civil War. So he grows up, but he was really raised on a plantation. And he is just this enormous, huge guy. It's kind of, if anybody has seen the movie The Green Mile, John Coffey, that's kind of what I had in mind. Like when he first comes, and he's a prison guard, and he does his job well. But you know, when any prisoners escape, they call Gator Wade, and Gator, because in the sloughs of Louisiana and all the bayous, he's not afraid to go in there, and he usually gets his man, you know. But he has a long Christian name, and And then the story is as the readers will see, it has a great ending where he climbs out of that bad experience and rises to a prominent position. Really, he's actually a master chef, and he and his wife, and she's French, and he's got a lot of that in him. But they open a French restaurant in New Orleans, and he does quite well with it. And so, and I think we'll see him again, later.
Was
But
going to ask.
yeah, and he's just an intriguing guy. He's very intelligent, but just in the first scene where he comes to Waco, he tracks 6 very dangerous killers within a few miles of Waco, and they escape from a plantation where actually it was Major Samuel James, a real Confederate soldier, but he was working prisoners on his plantation. And when they escaped, he didn't tell anybody because he was afraid it would put his plantation in a bad light and whatever. But consequently, a number of people died in Louisiana, these inmates, as they escaped. But when Gator comes to Waco and he knocks on the door, Jubal and his deputies are inside, and he just shakes the whole building when he bangs on the door. He's just a massive guy. And Jubal's angry. He's like, come in, and when he opened the door, they couldn't even see his head. It was above the door frame, and he ducked and stepped in. And, you just feel like you're there, like, and everybody gasped, like they've never seen anybody that big. And what's funny, another one of the characters in Jubal Stone that I think is beloved is Curly Snipes. He's a blacksmith, and he's been featured in several of the Jubals, but he's there. And up until now, Curly's been the biggest guy in town. But when he stands up beside Gator, he looks small for the first time, So it's just intriguing. Everybody's just like, I've never seen anybody that big in my life. But he's a very gentle guy and very articulate, very intellectual. But he is after those killers,
So is he becoming a reoccurring character in the books, or are we looking at spin-off series here?
Probably reoccurring right now. That I see him surfacing again, and I have a couple of new characters that are like that, and that's the neat thing about the series, I think, because new characters have to be born to carry the stories, and so I've got a couple of new ones that already I've used one in a second story, and I'll just give you a little preview on this book 41 that I've started. It's called The Gravedigger of Cherry Hill. And this guy just kind of shows up in Abilene, and that's where Jubal was from, but that's where Jubal's wife's parents live, and her dad gets sick. So they go to Abilene to see him. While they're there, the sheriff begins to tell Jubal about this guy that just came to town like 3 months ago. And the weird thing is he's predicting the people that are dying. He names them, and then he goes and digs their graves. And it has the whole town just in a frenzy, like, this is so morbid, and how can this guy know? And he calls himself a prophet and all that. So that's the next story. And Cherry Hill is the cemetery where Jubal's parents are buried. So that guy's going there periodically and digging graves. And that simply means somebody's about to die. But he always has an alibi, like, everybody thinks he's doing it at first, but it's going to have a lot of twists and turns to it. It's going to be a good one.
Indeed, that sounds like a fun one coming up there.
Yeah, I think so.
Very good. So when we're getting into Jubal and that type of a thing, what do we see him really becoming in the end?
Well, I think he's definitely a champion for justice of the West. He's a very fair guy, but he's firm. I mean, he's known for his anvil fist and his fast draw. But as he matures, there's a dignity about him. There's a respect for people and their property, and he's not a bully, but he is not afraid to deal with any kind of injustice. He just never backs down. So I would say he's just a great champion for justice in the West. Anybody that's being mistreated, he's going to defend them. And Waco that's his domain, so to speak, and he runs it hard. The town, and he's known for that. But if he didn't, it could get out of hand real quick.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So where can people find out more about all the Jubal Stone books and about you and everything else that you've created here?
Well, I have an author Amazon page that they can go to, and then also on Amazon, just type in Jubal Stone. It'll take you to every one of them. There, as I said, coming up number 40, so there's plenty to read. And I would encourage people, and I've seen this in the reviews, that those that's read them all, that say you do best reading the first one to get the background story. But then after probably about the fourth or fifth, they kind of are standalones.
Mm-hmm.
You could grab them at any point because you already know who Jubal is and his background, and so it would all make sense. So but Amazon, I think, is the best way to find them. Very
good. And number 40 is hitting shelves basically tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow.
Or by the time people see this interview today, go buy it now.
Exactly. I think they will love it, and I'm just looking forward to seeing the response on it.
Very good. Well, thank you for taking the time, Jim. I appreciate being able to talk to you and face to face and learning more about all the books, and particularly congratulations on number 40, although 41 and everything else seems to be right in line for all this too here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure. And I do want to just say, I want to thank those that have bought my books and are buying my books. I'm humbled by that somebody wants to read what I write, and I say that from my heart. But like I always say, if they'll keep reading them, I'll keep writing them.
Perfect. Well, hopefully you will keep writing them for a very good long time on this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.